Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now we're expecting the result of a crucial Lord's vote on Brexit within the next few minutes. Let's cross there live. I'm going to speak to our political editor, Faisal Islam, who's in our Westminster studio as we wait for that result. How significant is this vote, Faisal?
Well, I think it's expected to some degree. Government sources been sort of trying to explain that this vote is expected given the makeup of the House of Lords. But the size of this likely defeat will be quite interesting for starters. But also it will have an impact in the Commons. If this is passed, this amendment on the customs union being pushed on a cross-party basis after a short debate following hours of debates over the past few weeks. If it is passed, then it does go back to the House of Commons at the end of May, and it's a rather interesting calculation because certainly the government whips were rather sensitive about a slightly different vote on the customs union in the Commons that they felt that they might lose because of the number of Conservative rebels. What we're looking out for here is the Lord Speaker, Lord Fowler. He will be announcing contents and not contents in the way that they do things in the House of Lords. Contents means that those are votes for the amendment, an amendment that in a roundabout way sets the government in the direction of renegotiating a customs union with the European Union after we leave the EU. Remember, there was some slight inconsistency, or if you like, it was slightly vague what the government was after. In late January, early February, there was a notion that perhaps they might want to negotiate a customs union. That was slapped down by the European Research Group, and then eventually the Prime Minister clarified, Number 10 clarified, that a customs union was not on the agenda. That is now Labour policy, and the Lords look like, in the next few minutes, they look likely to back that. They are, as I say, voting right now. Some quite strong arguments from peers in this debate. On the one hand, from kind of government loyalists like the ex-cabinet minister Lord Forsyth, saying that peers were playing with fire. This could be peers against the people, and this was essentially a way to stop Brexit. Other kind of more famous Eurosceptics, Lord Lamont, and also other former chancellors, Lord Lawson, saying that this was a wrecking amendment, but a very organised effort in the Lords from Labour peers, Lib Dem peers, crossbenchers, and a whole series of Conservative rebels means that it looks pretty likely that the government has lost. We don't know yet. That result could just be about to be announced, if I'm looking at these pictures correctly. The argument on the side of Lord Kerr and Baroness Hayter was the government had lost its majority. It asked for a majority on the basis of things like leaving the customs union. Normally the Lords bows to the will of the Commons through the Salisbury Convention and other things. But on this occasion, Labour making the argument that the Tory manifesto did not get a majority. So that this is a legitimate way to express where they feel the Brexit negotiations could go. This is an amendment to the EU withdrawal bill, which passed through the House of Commons, has been going through the Lords. If this is passed, this is not the only amendment we expect to be passed. There's been a fairly well-organised effort, as I was saying, across the four corners of the House. There's maybe 6 or 7 more amendments that could pass. That means the House of Commons will have to try and strip those out. And a member of the Tory Eurosceptic group, the European Research Group, telling me that if this bill is amended by the Lords, which seems pretty likely, if it is amended, that they will have to take every amendment out, the government, have to vote it out, and that will be an issue of confidence in the government. I don't think Number 10 will see it like that, but that's what some Tory backbenchers think. So the stakes are pretty high, not necessarily directly from the result of this vote, but the consequences of the vote that we're having right now on the House of Commons in about a month's time. I think we're pretty close to getting the results of this vote. As I say, an important moment, the first Lord's vote on the EU withdrawal bill. And as the front bench takes their place, it's looking like a likely government defeat. Not sure if it definitively is, but we should be able to dip in fairly soon and hear this result from the House of Lords. Keir Starmer, I don't know if he still is there, but he certainly was there watching proceedings. It looks like the tellers are coming up to the bench to give the results, so let's listen in.
My Lords, there have voted contents 348, not contents have it.
Well, that's a huge majority there in the Lords for this amendment, defeating the government by my maths 123 the majority. So a number of Conservatives will have rebelled. My understanding included former ministers such as David Willits voting against the government, against their own party whip. So that's I think Labour sources were suggesting to me that they were looking at a majority of 60 to 80, but that is well over 100. So the government has been defeated in the House of Lords. The EU withdrawal bill is now amended to give a sense of the government trying to make efforts to join a customs union with the EU. That will now go back to the House of Commons alongside a series of other votes which may or may not go the government's way over the next few days, including later tonight. But the government defeated in the House of Lords on the issue of a customs union.
OK, Faisal, thanks very much indeed. Now, in the past few minutes, the government has suffered its first defeat in the House of Lords over the European Union withdrawal bill. Peers have voted by 348 votes to 225 in favour of an amendment that would see ministers report by the end of October on the efforts they've made to keep the UK as part of a customs union with the EU. Well, I'm joined from our Westminster studio by the Shadow Brexit Secretary, Sir Keir Starmer, MP. Good afternoon to you, Sir Keir. So, firstly, your reaction to this afternoon's vote?
This is a significant step forward for all of us who are arguing that the UK ought to stay in a customs union with the EU. So it's a very significant step. It's a very significant victory, not only because of what it says, but the size of the majority in the House of Lords. Obviously, it's now got to come back to the House of Commons to be considered, but it comes back with a very hefty majority, which I think tells you a lot about the importance of this issue, which is, should we be staying in a customs union with the EU?
Isn't this the peers against the people, the will of the people?
No, this is, as you'd expect, the usual parliamentary process. A bill will go up to the Lords, as all of them do, for amendments. If amendments are passed, and this obviously has been now, it comes back to the House of Commons for us to either approve or reject it. So ultimate power always resides with the House of Commons, where we're elected. The question now is what happens when this vote comes back to the House of Commons. But this is a significant step along the road for those of us that are arguing that it's in our economic interest for the UK to stay in a customs union with the EU.
Aren't you here using the superior numbers that Labour have in the House of Lords to push something through that you don't have the numbers for in the Commons?
Well, I think what's really important about this amendment is that it was a cross-party amendment. Lord Patten signed it and spoke to it. Significant and important peers from all parties supported it. So it doesn't come back as a Labour amendment, it comes back as a cross-party amendment. And I think that's important because there is cross-party concern about the fact that the Prime Minister ruled out a customs union with the EU as early as she did. So I don't think that this should be seen as something that only concerns one party. This is a very strong cross-party amendment that will come back to us in the House of Commons.
I mean, Number 10's been very clear that a customs union's not up for debate. If we want to be able to negotiate third-party trade deals, then we have to be outside of a customs union. Are you prepared to give that up?
Well, we all want new trade agreements, of course, and the question is not whether we have them, but whether we're better off seeking to negotiate those alongside the EU in future, as we could do if we're in a customs union, or whether we're better off on our own. Now, we were promised that lots of countries would be queuing up to give us...
That's having your cake and eating it, isn't it?
No. If you stay within the... No. That's the simple rules of a customs union. If you stay within a customs union, you have tariff-free movement of goods, as everybody wants.
But then you can't negotiate those deals outside.
Well, we would seek to negotiate them alongside the EU, and us and the EU together would then be a very, very powerful negotiating bloc. The idea that on our own somehow we'd have more influence in trade deals is one that, to say the least, is completely untested. The proposition, I mean, the government has on a number of occasions said there's going to be countries queuing up, we'll have had trade deals already almost signed. None of that has come to pass. And manufacturing industries in this country are saying to us, we need to be protected by being in a customs union. Don't throw all that away on some fantasy that is not going to come to pass. The other important thing in this, of course, is that the government is solemnly committed to no hard border in Northern Ireland. And that involves us being in a customs union. And one of the questions the government has never been able to answer, which is how are you actually going to keep to that commitment if at the same time you're throwing away any chance of being in a customs union. And I think that's one of the reasons why this amendment's got such strong backing.
But I just wonder what this amendment is actually going to deliver. The former Brexit Minister David Jones has said it will generate lots of smoke but not a lot of fire, and we must leave the customs union to negotiate trade deals. This amendment won't stop that.
Well, if the government... I mean, all very well, and it's very typical of the government to try and play down an amendment when they've just lost by a crushing number. But the government knows that this is a clear statement of intent about a customs union. There are other amendments that are in other bills on their way through Parliament as well. The government knows that on its own side, there are MPs who are really concerned about the prospect of leaving the customs union, and that sooner or later this is going to come to the crunch and a decision is going to have to be made. This amendment takes us one step down that line. It will come back to the Commons. If the government's truly not concerned about it, no doubt they won't vote against it, but I doubt it. OK,
Sir Keir Starmer, thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
The government has lost a key vote in the House of Lords this evening over Brexit. A cross-party group of peers is pressing for the UK to remain in a customs union after it's left the European Union. Our deputy political editor, John Pienaar, is at Westminster for us this evening. How much of a setback is this then, John?
Well, Sophie, Brexit's become a trial of strength, a test of the government and the Brexiteers and their opponents. And here in the House of Lords, just a short while ago, the government came off worst when peers voted for Britain to explore continuing to be a member of the European Customs Union. Now, that would mean no customs checks, it would mean no customs duties, but it would also mean having to follow EU rules, and it would stop Britain from exploring and striking its own trade deals around the world. So there'll be another struggle as the government seeks to persuade MPs just along the corridor in the House of Commons to overturn this defeat this evening, and that's not because they think it would necessarily force them to change policy. Inside government, they're saying that having to explore membership of a customs union is so vague that it would probably practically mean very little. But there are more struggles still to come about the terms of Brexit, about the terms of a final deal on leaving the European Union, and the government does not want to give any ground, if it can avoid it, to their opponents here at Westminster. So you may have thought the battle of Brexit had gone rather quiet, but there are plenty of battles still to come, and the shape of Brexit and the authority of the government and the Prime Minister rest on the outcome.
John Pienaar, thank you.
Now, a few weeks back, you couldn't move for Brexit coverage on this programme, but it's all been rather quieter in recent times. That changed, in fact, a little today after the Lords voted to amend the EU withdrawal bill. They hope their amendment, will force the government's hand on Britain remaining in a customs union with the EU. The government takes a completely different view about it. Our political editor, Nick Watt, is with me. Nick, what exactly did the Lords vote for today?
Well, it's a pretty heavy defeat for the government in the House of Lords on a customs union. By 348 to 225 votes, peers voted to require the government to report back by the end of October on the steps that they are taking to negotiate membership of a customs union with the EU. Now, the crucial point is they're not forcing or requiring the government to negotiate a customs union. It's milder than that, because everybody agrees that you couldn't oblige the government to do that. The government is saying it's disappointed. It hasn't decided yet whether it will seek to overturn this vote in the House of Commons. But crucially, the government's saying is even if this goes through, the UK will still leave the customs union. Right. And the government says that's really important in terms of negotiating free trade deals around the world.
Well, look ahead a little bit, because obviously this is just a Lords amendment. This now goes back to the Commons. One suspects that there are more MPs overall who would rather be in a customs union than out of it. Does that mean it's...
Well, pro-European Tories are very chipper. They're saying that the government, if the government does seek to overturn this in the House of Commons, they will be in trouble and they really won't be able to do it. And essentially what they're saying is that they believe that this is now creating a great momentum behind a customs union, being in a customs union. And I was talking to one senior pro-European Tory who said that now people are seeing that there really is a choice. It's a choice between what this person described as utterly speculative free trade deals around the world and being in the European Union Customs Union, good, they say, for manufactured jobs and for dealing with the Northern Ireland border.
OK. Nick, thank you very much.